Oh, hey everybody. I'm Metal Mary, and this is Maxx. Maxx! Yo, Maxx!
Here I am, Mary.
Oh,
I'm here.
there
I'm
he
on
is.
time.
There
I'm
he
always
is.
on time.
He's the man, he's on time, and we are getting ready to throw out another Wax to Grind podcast for all y'all. Broadcasting from the Attic Record Store in Millvale, Pennsylvania.
That's right, center of the universe. Where there's nothing wrong if you want to do the butt all night long.
But what if you don't want to do the butt all night long? I think we're going to do
Then
the
you
butt.
go to Lawrenceville.
I think everyone is a butt in Lawrenceville. That's just
But
my personal
seriously.
opinion. Southsider in the house, you know what I mean? I got to throw some shade at the at Lawrenceville.
Fair
the
enough.
The
Touche.
hipster, yes, absolutely. But a lot of people from Lawrenceville actually do come to the Attic and have vast knowledge about records and shop here. So we're just kidding, of course, naturally. We're going to start out this week by talking about some new releases. Maxx is usually in charge because he is here and he is receiving the records and he's posting the records. So Maxx,
Well,
why
let's
don't you
go
tell us
through
what you
some
got?
of our favorite records this week. We'll do it very quickly. By the way, this is our third episode of Wax to Grind. We have a very special guest for you.
Tres hombres.
And stay on board. We're gonna get out the Sleaze-o-meter a little bit later, so make sure you stick around. So, one of the best records this week is this one. Can you see it? R.A. the Rugged Man. If you're into hip hop, this guy's been around since the early '90s. Speaking of sleazy, he was kicked off a few major labels for doing some notorious sleazy things, but now he's back. And he's better than ever. And he's had a long career, and actually that's probably his best record he's released yet, which is pretty impressive. So that's on Nature Sounds, and it's a really good record. Pick it up. R.A. the Rugged Man, All My Heroes Are Dead. It's got all kind of people from Wu-Tang, Ice-T, Cool G Rap, Chuck D, Vinny Paz. What's up, Vinny? All right. This is a nice reissue that I would suggest. Even though he was, I remember this is Rocky Erickson, and he was the singer of the 13th Floor Elevators. I remember I was lucky enough to go visit him one time, maybe about 8 years after this was recorded, maybe 10. And he was in a pretty bad state, apparently, for a long time. He was living amongst, like, he had a hoarder house, like mail, and all the TVs were on, and it was very bizarre, but he could still record beautiful music. And this EP was especially one of my favorites, and it had some great songs like Starry Eyes, Don't Slander Me, You Don't Love Me Yet, Clear Night for Love. I mean, this is 100% great songs. It's just an EP, but it just got reissued on Alternative Fox. I would recommend that one if you're interested in any Rockies post 13th Floor Elevator stuff. Here's a label here. It's called ON or On Records from the UK. They've been doing a lot of good UK post-punk stuff, if that's your thing, like Early Creation and C86 stuff. Here's one of my favorite ones they've done, the Razor Cuts. But they've done the early Loft single, which is really good. And a really great second single by The Wedding Present, which is really good, fast, jangly, post-punk. You know, not for punk rockers, but not quiet. You know, it was definitely things were changing around there in the UK, and this label's been putting out a lot of good stuff.
So
There was a lot of mod crossover at that
Exactly.
time. Like Television Personalities is your perfect crossover between post-punk, but they were all teenagers, so their instruments sounded more artsy. So they had that mod. They're coming out of the punk scene, but they were mods. They worshiped the jam. You know what I mean? And but they came out with something different. Now this was more of an arty scene, more of an influence from the Velvet Underground than the straight mod scene, like say the Cigarettes or somebody like that. But there's definitely mod influences in some of these bands. And that was really the only, that was the beginning of the throwback to the 60s, because, the 60s weren't that far away in like the late 70s, early 80s, so that's when that first started. And this label's doing a really good job. They put out all kind of great bands. ON Records or On Records. They give you all kind of booklets, info, extra postcards and things like that, and they're doing it good. I hope they keep covering that scene, because that's a underrepresented scene in the reissue series.
And I think it's kind of interesting how that genre of music, like you said, sort of like morphed into other things and combined with other things, but retained its integrity, so that it's sort of like, you know, when you're making a recommendation to somebody, you can give a solid recommendation to people that like A, B, C, and D. It doesn't necessarily have to fit in that tiny little box to appeal to a large group of people.
Well, that's when, you know, the original punks, like, you know, the guys that created Creation, Ed Ball, he was in the TV personalities or labels like Dream World or all those labels. They were the punks that were there, but instead of like, you know, some of it broke off and then went like harder and took it more to the punkier edge. Some of it went artier, some of it went 60s, some of it went mod. You know, it's funny how that punk spark is just, and then you look at it now and it's so specific now, you know. And but this is the start of like, instead of like you know, staying with the Motorhead influence or bands like that, they went with the Velvets and bands like Love and bands like that. And it's an interesting thing. It still has the punk energy, lots of guitars, very young. You know, they were still young, but it still definitely takes in a lot more influences than your typical punk, you know, if that makes sense.
Great breakdown.
All right. And speaking of which, is the Velvet Underground. Now this cover is from a concert from when the Velvet Underground played with the MC5 in Boston. The MC5 opened up for the Velvet Underground and tried to get the kids there to like tear down the hall. And I guess there was a mini riot, and then the Velvet Underground got on stage and berated the MC5 for being assholes because they liked the clothes. And that's what this flyer is from, but that's not what's on here. I was hoping it would be, but no, but it's even better. It's outtakes from the Loaded era. You know, some people say that's their worst album. Some people think it's their best album. It's definitely their most normal sounding album, but these demos give it a rough edge that make it sound much better. And some of my favorite Velvet stuff is on here, like I Found a Reason, like the original demo, and then like the original Rock and Roll, and Sweet Jane, which actually had a whole nother bridge to it, which got cut out. So you can hear how it was supposed to sound on this. Sounds great. Legendary outtakes. Awesome stuff. I'll hurry up here. Sun City Girls, long time. I first heard them on like old skate comps. They used to be on Mystic. You know, it's funny now they're world music connoisseurs. They're legends now. You know, and they've had a long career out there in like Arizona, but they do world music now. This is a limited edition of 1,000. You get a DVD in it, and it's really good. If you're a Sun City Girls fan, jump on that.
A lot of bands transition over the years, don't have that type of life expectancy, don't continue to release records that people are not only buying but enjoying, especially when they go through so many transitions and style changes. So that's kind of neat that you broke that down as well. It's always interesting to see a band that can actually, that can withstand the test of time and so many drastic changes, going from Mystic Records to this to world music. I mean, it's not something that, you know, usually people, I want these records, I want that records, I want this era.
You would see them on flyers like back in the 80s with like skate punk bands, you know, and here they are, they're still doing stuff. They're traveling the world, making videos, making interesting music. That's great. It didn't work out necessarily so much for Celtic Frost and Discharge when they took a big change. For real. I mean, some people do like those records, and you know, everybody wants to change once in a while. I am myself not a fan of the big Metallica change. Going from Injustice for All was a deal breaker for a lot of people. I do see some things in it that I do like, but they changed so much that I do prefer the first 3 records. But as a musician, do you really want to sit there repeating yourself to appease a fan base? No, but I think it's the fan base. That's such a fine line to walk. The fan base isn't always forgiving about, you know, about change, especially when they're married to like your first couple, you know, your introductions. I mean, the Beatles albums as a band, everybody knows, in under a decade transition, each record sounds different. That's a good point. And it's really hard to believe that they knocked it out of the park on each record. You know, that's a good point. That is one band who would stylistically change very rapidly. The Stones did as well. It was a little bit more of a gradual, or at least it was a little bit more. They had more of a history as far as releasing a lot of records over time and having a chance to sort of move from, you know, moving and develop
where they wanted to be at the time.
Sure.
But the Beatles was so like, I don't think people realize.
And how quickly they changed.
Right.
I mean,
I
that's
think when
just
you get a little bit older and you realize
And you
how
realize,
short
yeah.
a decade is
Yeah.
and what they offered and changed and it worked, I think it's difficult for bands to do that. But so again, I think it's a great recommendation and also a good history, not only of the band, but an example of that taking place.
That's
So,
interesting. Can you think of any other bands that like? I mean, how about Van Halen with Diamond Dave, who I love, and then with Sammy Hagar, who I'm not a fan of.
I think there's a big, whenever you're talking about changing somebody such as a front
Personnel is
person
different,
and a
yeah.
front person, definitely. Everybody's equally as important, but
Yeah.
most people, especially if you're not a musician, most people, if you're not a musician, are going to hear the drummer and the singer first. They have to be able to tap their toe to it. It's got to
Yeah.
have, they have to be able to keep time, and they want to hear what the singer has to say and hear the voice. So I think that is why even the best of the guitar players, the bass players, keyboard players, when they're replaced, sometimes it's not as noticeable to somebody that doesn't, pay attention to that sort of a thing. But I think that's the thing about the Sammy Hagar change.
Yeah.
You could do Motley Crue, Van Halen. I'm trying to think of other bands that made big changes. You can talk about Bon
A
Scott.
million of them.
Oh, happy birthday, Bon Scott.
Oh, it's
by
a
the
Bon
way.
Scott's
Yes,
birthday.
Yes, happy birthday, Bon Scott. Shout out, of course. And I think when it's a case where a period of time has passed and somebody actually passes away, so when people talk about Brian Johnson versus talking about Bon Scott, I think we're talking about, I understand having a preference for one or the other. It's all about taste. But when somebody is just completely removed from the picture,
Yeah,
then
the
the
planet.
band goes on. Absolutely, yeah, for sure, for sure.
right.
You got any other new releases
Yeah,
you want
a
to talk
couple more.
about? Okay.
This one isn't exactly new, but it's new on vinyl to me. The Rat Pack live at the Sands. Mostly for the Sammy Davis Jr. dialogue, which I love. Also, made most famous from the Sopranos boat scene. This record was used as good revenge on the Sopranos. Were you a Sopranos fan?
I watched it all. I would have to rewatch to remember, but that would fit in perfectly.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just because I'm
it's a
thinking of
great
Nancy
scene.
Sinatra making an
I
appearance
love
in an episode.
Nancy
which is very
Sinatra,
cool.
which we will talk about later. And another new band from Boston, Banshee, who are an interesting Boston band. To me, they sound like if Alice Cooper sang for the Stooges in a Cambodian opium den. It's pretty wild if you're a fan of like Union Carbide or Stooges or Fuzzwall. They give you an interesting booklet. It's pretty wild stuff. It's been a while since I've heard a good sleazy, rockin', wild rock record, man. And I dig this record by Banshee. Check it out if you're into, I don't know if this one's colored or not. Oh yeah, there we go.
I don't think I've ever seen vinyl that color.
Yeah,
to be
it's cool.
honest with you.
And so, that's just a good new record that I've been digging, man. It's right up my alley. Lots of fuzz.
This is some
really
cool
wild.
packaging
Yeah,
as well.
cool packaging. Yeah, Banshee from Boston. Check them out. And then locally, I know you heard this because we were speaking of it.
We spoke about it in the last episode that we did with Todd from the Cheats, but we are such fans of this record, of this 7-inch that is fresh off the presses, and we're lucky to say that they're from our city, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I could go on about this for so long. I'm such a fan. I know you're a fan too. It would be, it'd be really, really cool if we had somebody from the band to give us a little bit of a story behind it.
I don't know. Turn on the magical
Yeah,
record cam.
let's think. Maybe if we will ourselves to do this, we can make it happen.
How did the Fat Albert thing go?
Hey, hey. Oh, like a blossom in a spring. Just keep going.
Funyun.
Like a
blooming
onion.
like a
Ladies and
blooming
gentlemen,
onion down in Applebee's.
Look at this.
Hey,
We made it
that's-
happen.
Hey, that's the Outback.
The Outback. I'm sorry.
Get it right.
Guys.
I ain't no baseball games. I don't know I ain't never go to Outback now.
This is Becky, aka
Hey,
Mick Jagoff. Mick Jagoff from the Chokers. Now, you prefer Becky instead of Mick Jagoff?
for tonight.
Okay. Because I've heard a lot of people refer to you as Jagoff. I was just thinking maybe that you preferred that.
I didn't know whether to call myself Mick Jagoff or Mick Jagoff, like McLovin.
Oh, like
Oh,
MC
Mick like
Jag-
McDonald's
yeah.
Jagoff.
Yes.
So
that
you would have
be
been a
cool.
Scottish Jagoff. Okay, yeah.
Scottish Jagoff.
That's okay. There's Scottish roots in this part of the country. I think that would have been very appropriate. And Jagoff is obviously very appropriate for this part of the country. So
Yeah,
yeah,
sport.
we've been loving the record back.
Yeah, we
so,
read these names out last
Thank you.
one. I
Yes,
think.
we
They
did.
were very good. I
Yes,
like
we
them.
did.
Good.
I remember when they hit the store and you brought them in, and we were all very excited. I think it's a great record. We're familiar with the songs because we've seen you guys, but what prompted you to choose those songs for this 7-inch?
I'd like to first of all say that there's a hidden track on here, but you can't really hide a track on a 7-inch, and it's called Cantaloupe, and I wasn't in favor
I
of
noticed
putting
that.
it on there. People just think it's a mistake that there's only one song listed on the side B, but we chose Pistrong because it was, I don't know, it's a hit. Hot Garbage, also a hit. Fruit Loop, probably one of my top songs. So
Yeah.
Fruit Loop is a Pittsburgh anthem, I would say.
And it's to my understanding that you submitted this song for a contest. Do you want to tell us about?
So DV had a power ballad contest, so I submitted Fruit Loop. So you had to mention all kinds of things about Pittsburgh, but the Fruit Loop is a hookup spot in Shenley Park. So I thought it was a shoo-in. It's a great song. It's about the right tempo. I thought we'd at least get a mention, and we did not.
Nil.
And the
no
big
response.
nil. It's okay.
I thought it
Randy
was.
Bauman,
I thought it-
still like you.
I thought it was a bold move, though, for that reason. That it was definitely something that would be a little bit outside of the box, as far as very Pittsburgh, as far as the topic goes, which is completely appropriate for what the requirements were. But definitely, it definitely has a lot more of an edge than I would assume what would be submitted to a contest like that. But the fact that you submitted it is awesome.
Yeah.
It was a lark.
It
was
won
great.
in our hearts.
Exactly.
Okay.
You were the winner.
What if you would have? What if you would have won?
We would have gotten 2 tickets to several hair metal shows
Oh well, that.
Wow.
and a night in a hotel that we probably wouldn't have been able to use.
Can I just say that any of these could be about Pittsburgh? What did it smell like tonight with the
Hot
sun out?
garbage.
Millville smelled like cooking garbage
It
tonight.
smelled like ass.
Yeah, it smelled like someone threw away their ass, and that ass rotted in the hot sun. That's what it smelled like.
Well,
so
why didn't you
also,
pick it up?
this could be hot garbage. Could be also a Pittsburgh ballad, I think. If it was a ballad.
Slow it down.
Yeah, slow it down.
Drop in some references about,
You know,
they
one
just
day
talk-
late
talk
pick
the
up on the.
point and
No, like
what
you
else?
get. How about you
The
could
regatta.
reference.
The regatta.
And Donzies.
yes.
And you
No,
could
no one
reference
said it.
no one knows when the garbage comes on a holiday weekend since it was July 4th.
Oh, right.
So now you got hot garbage out there, you don't know when they're gonna get it.
Our CD is coming out very soon, too.
Fantastic.
So we'll have
What's the name of
yes.
I think it's just self-titled. I guess we didn't. Yeah, it is because we never chose a title. I
No.
tried a little contest on Facebook. We couldn't. Nobody agreed within the band. I liked Children of the Cornhole. So the options
I
were
like
Children of the Cornhole, Moves Like Jagoff, and
I like that.
and Debbie Does Donzies.
Debbie's does. Oh, those are
Which
all
is
brilliant.
great. But everybody was like, well, the Donzies thing is too outdated. And I was like, I like things that are outdated.
And
Yeah,
classic.
Debbie does down.
Classic. Not
That's
outdated.
great.
Classic. It's a classic.
I mean, how can you update it? I mean,
well, what I think is cool about self-titled is I always love self-titled records.
They're the best.
They are the best. It's Impact. It is what it is. Ouch, my ears for doing that. I apologize. But also, you had a name change.
We did.
So
yeah.
that's kind of cool because it is still kind of on the fresh side of everything, right? It's
the not so fresh side.
it's fresh to everyone who's watching this.
I'm just making a Massengill reference. As I am wont to do.
I like Summer's Eve.
Is it
I don't know if it's
menopause?
Summer's
Yeah.
Eve or Massengill, but yeah.
It's really bad for you. It is. Do people know? Do people actually think it's good for you?
Does anyone douche? Any douchers in the audience?
I have a hot water bottle and a rack. But anyway, all right. So, how many bands have you been in now?
My first band was Beaverhead. I was the bass player. We played
Beaverhead,
one show.
I don't remember them.
We played one show. Then I was the Polish Hillbillies,
Yeah, I remember
the
that.
Drag Strippers, Local Honey,
Remember all
Spinster, Bloated Sluts, and Chokers, which are kind of the same band. So I guess like 6 bands. I might be forgetting something. Plus I've done, you know, I've done Asphalt Mother with
Oh,
you,
yeah, that's right.
and Lux and Fury are with you.
Which was a blast.
Yeah,
That's great.
It was a blast, and you make a
Yeah,
perfect
those were
Lux.
fun.
thanks. I know. I love jam. They're both 2 of the best musicians in town. So,
Likewise.
Well, thank you.
Likewise.
Yeah, because boy, I've probably seen you play many, many times. Always entertaining,
Likewise.
always fun. I was just trying to
Is
think.
that
When
the-
did you
that's the
start?
catchphrase?
when did I start?
Yeah,
my
like
first
so.
band?
When were you?
So Beaverhead was 93, our
93.
one show at Graffiti.
Oh, you played graffiti.
Yeah, it was like the
With-
pay-to-play night.
Oh,
We
God.
all worked there, so it was the
Oh, you
only
worked
way
at
we got
Graffiti?
there. Yeah, I was a cocktail waitress there
Mm.
after I left the decade. I went to the decade after
worked at the
Graffiti.
decade?
I did, yeah, I did. It was the last when it was on its last
Did you
legs.
see the decade book where they had the list of all the bands that played and stuff like
No,
that?
I did not. I did not.
Yeah, someone put together a decade book.
Cool.
Yeah, it's
To
pretty
look
cool.
at that.
I couldn't believe how many times I actually played in the last month of the decade.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Was
they're
it
like
Cynic
6
Steve,
times.
Steel Miners?
Cynics, all those bands. Mount McKinley, Cynics, Steel
How many
Miners.
bands have you been in?
I don't know. A lot. A dozen. A dozen maybe. But it's about you.
I'd rather talk about other people. But
So let's talk about you now.
So okay, so you were always into music since you were a kid?
oh yeah. Can I pull up a record that I was really into as a kid?
Not yet.
Or not yet? Oh man, format.
No, of course you can. So,
Oh, I forgot to
but
pull
like,
the
do you
Solid
remember?
Gold records.
Do you remember? Okay, so you watched Solid Gold, right?
I did.
The Marilyn McCoo years.
I did.
Who was her guest host?
That Madam, the puppet. Right? Wasn't it?
What was that guy's name? George
I
something
thought
and
Madam the fucking puppet
I thought
was
Andy
good.
Gibb was her.
Oh, the Bee Gees guy. Okay.
Well, the younger brother that killed himself.
Oh man. There was
Solid
Barry,
Gold.
Barry,
Maurice.
Andy, and Maurice.
And then Andy was the younger one who was solo.
He had
Okay.
shadow dancing, I think was one
Yeah,
of his
he had
hits.
hits.
And
And
I
I
just
thought
wanna
he
be
was
your
the co-host,
everything.
right?
He was at one time, but I don't remember with whom. I didn't know if he was
Yeah.
with Dion. Guys, I can only remember Dion
Wow.
Warwick. That's
Oh yeah, maybe.
All I can
yeah, that's
remember.
right. Marilyn McCoo.
Yeah.
And then so the puppet was on there. I remember the puppet from Hollywood
Madam.
Squares. Yeah, I
Wow.
love Madam.
That wasn't the co-host.
It could have been.
she was a regular. He was regular.
Just think of that gas
Oh.
station an hour ago, and I feel okay. The streets of Millville.
You also had various DJ gigs, correct?
I did, yeah.
So,
yeah.
what was your favorite DJ gig in Pittsburgh? Can you narrow it down?
Oh man, I had a regular once a month Friday at Remedy. I did every other Friday night at Mexico City downtown. That was my best paying gig. I do Belvedere's occasionally. I did a couple of friends' weddings, parties, whatever. I DJ'd probably 10 times a year.
Did you do vinyl?
Yeah. And
Wow.
it was getting tough, man, going up the steps to the second floor of Remedy with all my records
Oh,
and my
yeah.
turntables and all that stuff. It was cool. You know how it is being a DJ. If you're like,
Yeah. Especially
Not
if you got a lot
necessarily-
of equipment.
well, it's not even that. I've had people that weren't into what I was playing that would jump up and down to make my records skip.
Yeah.
People tell me that my shit was corny and like, it was rough. I had some really good nights and some really awful nights.
Yeah.
And I just kind of let it go after a while. I bought a ton of records then though, and I don't find myself doing that much anymore because I don't have to. Like if I have to do something for someone else or do it for work, I will do it. But if it's just for me, I will not do it.
So, do you remember what music you liked first that you were like, man, I want to sing? Like, who did you hear? Like, who were you like, shit, that's like awesome.
I mean, my first
I could do
love
that.
was Billy Idol.
Yeah.
My first like real love. But also like my mom was a super disco queen. So there's always disco playing. And
Okay.
I loved that too. And I would try to dance with the solid gold dancers.
Yeah.
My sister made outfits for me. She took one of my mother's handkerchiefs and a belt and made me a G-string.
Wow.
And we were like partying when my mom got home and she was so mad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because she was, my sister was dressing me up in like, solid gold dancer outfits, which
Yeah.
aren't for children. So, but yeah, I loved the, the disco era, and then
Sure.
I moved into like the new wave era. I got really into Patsy Cline when I was in high school.
Sure.
Yeah, I grew up in a town of 1,200 people. The radio station was terrible. It was like adult contemporary. But my sister would occasionally bring home some good music, especially when she went to college, and she was a lot older than me, so that was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and what did she turn you into?
All the new wave stuff, mostly.
And she was a new wave older sister. Older brothers and sisters are
They're key. I mean, you have a
especially-
million of them.
Yes,
Right?
and I wouldn't, you know what I mean? I wouldn't know half the music. I probably wouldn't even be into music if all those records weren't like around the house.
We weren't a music-filled house. Like, my mom listened to, like, besides the disco, she liked James Taylor and Anne Murray.
Well, that's very typical of the time.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. My dad listened to a little bit more music, so when I would be at his house, there was, a little bit more. But yeah, we didn't have like access to records and things. Like we would listen to the crappy radio station and maybe buy a couple tapes here and there, but we'd have to like drive to Scranton to get music, which was 40 minutes away.
Just to get music, because every little town seems like it would
Not
have
when
like
I was growing up. Not when I was growing
because
up.
those seem to like the days of like every town would have a national record mart or at least a
No,
little
dude,
mom and
1,200
pop
people. It was so small.
or even the local Ben Franklin or whatever.
What's Ben
would-
Franklin?
Do you remember those little stores? Do you remember those?
I know who Ben Franklin
Huh,
was.
no one remembers
I don't-
Ben
I
Franklin
don't-
stores?
you know,
Murphy's, like Mars.
Murphy's,
They
Martin
would have
Mills,
records.
yes, sure.
They would have records in those little stores.
We didn't even have stuff like that. We had a drugstore called Hi-Lo.
And
And
they-
we had
they
a place
didn't have
called the
any
Trading
records there?
Post that sold like Indian figurines and like cigarettes and porno. There was
They
nothing
had porno
there.
but no records.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Because I don't know, sometimes porno and records will combine.
Yeah.
like
yeah.
get IDs.
Yeah.
Well, I like those.
Don't go there, Corrigan.
I like those records before porno was available. They used to make porno records that were like XXX.
What was the sound? What were the sounds like? Was it just like?
Oh, well, they were like stories. It would be like nympho horny housewives.
Oh, and it would
and
something
then
like
one was like
narrated, like
yeah, and then one was like cowboy, horny cowboy. There's lesbian ones like nasty AC/DC, lesbo, action, all these things.
Can I get some of these?
I was trying to find. I had a couple set aside, and I couldn't find them today.
Okay.
But I will find them and make sure you get to check them out. I swear I
I have
them sitting
tons
out.
of those like nasty paperbacks. The titles
Oh,
are
yeah.
It's like
Oh.
someone,
The art
just,
is great.
someone just read a Harlequin romance novel and they pressed it on
It's
vinyl.
not. Oh, these aren't Harlequin.
No,
Okay,
they're
all
straight
right,
up.
all
They're
right.
like
They are
Hustler.
nasty. Like
And
the ones
Hustler
that I
used to put
have-
flexies in their records. I have, or in
Oh,
their
really?
mags. I have a couple
Were they
flexies.
music or
no,
porn?
they were like sex sounds.
People are
And then they have like remember there was like a paperback called The Sensuous Woman? They made a record.
Oh, I remember my mom had
Yeah,
that.
they made that into a record with like disco music and then the sounds of like bed springs like
Jesus Christ.
I collect sex records. Sorry. I'm a weirdo. I'm a creep. I'm admitting
No, it's
too
cool.
much.
Like I collect those paperbacks, and they range from being suggestive to the worst shit
Dude,
you've ever
the
heard
worst.
in your life.
I found one that I gave it to Johnny, my friend. I left it in his house, hoping he wouldn't see it. And he was like, "Did you leave something in my house? I'll kill you. I had someone over."
Yes.
That was a successful maneuver.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
believe.
So it
Oh,
was, those
my
are it was a
God.
terrible book, really terrible.
They're all like
the cover was
misspelled
like,
and-
What is it about gnarly sex? And it's becoming the butt of a practical joke. Always, like if someone's leaving something in someone's bunk
Yeah.
or somebody's
Their
trunk.
yeah.
your bunk or your trunk.
Check your bunk and your trunk for that junk. insurance coverage fund.
Ah!
Well, I think. I
What
don't
was
know
the
what
one
to say.
I was reading the other night? It was
I was
called
reading the other.
Hooked on Swap. It's
Oh,
really
Hooked on Swap.
nasty.
So it's about like a couple.
Yeah, okay, so
Oh, thank you.
it's about all kinds of couples.
Yeah.
Yes. And then there's another one, you can cut this, it's called That Awful Dildo. you can leave it too, I don't care.
It's like one specific dildo
Yes.
that she's like can't get rid of. I can't leave you, dildo.
Oh, sounds like a horror movie.
I mean,
Doesn't it?
Obviously there's no FTC in here. But I mean,
Correct.
it's also like your name and your dignity, so you
Well,
don't
we
have
can
to,
always
like,
edit it out with
You-
the time stuff and let everybody else watch the stuff that we can't
Okay.
show, Yeah.
All right, but this is a Sleaze episode, so
Yeah,
I'm fine with anything.
I mean, I don't
With
care,
people.
but